Imagine a world where the hum of bombers filled the night sky, where blackout curtains swallowed every glimmer of light, and where even a single cube of sugar felt like treasure. This was life during World War II, but hidden behind the headlines and the front lines were women whose battles were fought not with rifles, but with ration books, sewing needles, and an unshakable will to keep their families alive. These were the housewives of the 1940s. To the outside eye, they seemed graceful, calm, composed, and dignified. But behind every calm smile lay a secret: ingenious tricks, unspoken sacrifices, and countless adaptations that turned scarcity into survival. Their kitchens became laboratories of creativity, their homes fortresses of resilience, and their everyday routines a quiet kind of heroism. From stretching a chicken across 3 meals to transforming tattered fabrics into children's clothes, from planting victory gardens to polishing windows with nothing but old newspaper, these women carried secrets of survival that still inspire us today. Their grace was not about glamour, but about finding beauty and order when the world itself was falling apart. Over the course of this video, we're going to peel back those layers of hidden wisdom, rediscovering the forgotten routines, ingenious adaptations, and quiet strengths of the wartime housewife. What you'll hear is more than history. It's a reminder of human resilience and of the power of grace under fire. So let's step back into that world and uncover the secrets. Imagine stepping back into the 1940s, a time when every graceful housewife carried secrets the world rarely saw. While the battlefields roared overseas, the home itself became a battlefield of its own. This was the true wartime housewife life, a story of strength, sacrifice, and forgotten routines that defined an entire generation. In the United States, between 1941 and 1945, more than 6 million women stepped into the civilian workforce. They became the backbone of factories, shipyards, and offices, filling the gaps left by husbands, brothers, and sons who were deployed across oceans. Yet, even as these women earned their wages, the same hands returned home each evening to scrub floors, ration food, mend clothes, and raise children alone. Grace meant far more than a calm smile. It meant surviving on too little sleep and too much worry. Quick marriages became common, with young sweethearts rushing to the altar before soldiers shipped out. The result was a wave of young mothers, left to cradle newborns in one hand and telegrams in the other, never knowing if their husbands would ever return. Across the Atlantic, the realities were even more unforgiving. From 1941 onward, women in Britain were conscripted into war work. They became mechanics, engineers, munitions workers, and air raid wardens, often standing shoulder to shoulder with men while earning only a fraction of the pay. Women received only 14 shillings a week compared to men's 21 shillings, yet their responsibilities carried the same danger. Still, they carried on with a quiet dignity, their resilience forming the invisible threads that held society together. Rationing, however, was the daily battle no one could escape. In the United States, sugar, coffee, and gasoline were the first to vanish from shelves. By 1943, meat, cheese, fats, and canned goods joined the list. Housewives clutched ration books filled with stamps, standing in long lines only to be told supplies had already run out. Nearly 100,000 women across America volunteered as unpaid assistants to local rationing boards, distributing coupons and calming frustrations, a hidden workforce that kept communities afloat. In Britain, rationing was even harsher, with everything from clothing to eggs under tight control. A single egg might be stretched across several meals, and butter became a rare luxury, replaced by powdered substitutes that never quite tasted the same.
Fuel shortages cast their own chill over family life. Winters became long tests of endurance, with housewives heating only one room in the home to conserve every drop of oil or coal. Children slept under layers of quilts and sweaters, their breath fogging in the cold morning air. Yet, in these moments, grace shone through in the smallest acts. Mothers crafting soups from scraps, turning leftover bones into broth, or patching old coats so children could walk to school with dignity. The emotional toll was immeasurable. Over 15 million Americans served in the armed forces, and nearly 400,000 would never return home. Each knock at the door carried a shadow of fear as telegrams arrived with devastating news. For housewives, nights were the loneliest hours, long vigils by the radio, waiting for a voice from the front, praying into silence. In Britain, blackout curtains turned every home into a darkened cell by sundown. Air raid sirens pierced the night, and women often traded their aprons for armbands, serving as overnight fire watchers on rooftops. Sleep was shallow, interrupted by the thud of distant bombs or the uneasy quiet that followed. And yet, even in this darkness, the human spirit endured. Victory gardens became a symbol of resilience and patriotism. By 1943, more than 20 million such gardens had been planted in the United States alone, producing nearly 40% of the nation's vegetables. Housewives turned patches of backyard soil, schoolyards, and even city rooftops into life-giving harvests. Carrots, beans, and cabbages grew where lawns once stood, feeding families and easing the strain on commercial farms. In Britain, allotments flourished across towns and villages, transforming empty plots into lifelines. These were not just gardens, they were living testaments to sacrifice and unity. They showed how the smallest daily acts of women, watering plants, saving seeds, stretching rations, could echo with national importance. This hidden grace, born of hardship, turned ordinary routines into extraordinary contributions. It remains one of the most forgotten housewife routines of wartime America and Britain, the quiet heroism of keeping life steady when the world itself was trembling. The story of the wartime housewife is not only about survival, it is about dignity in deprivation, hope in despair, and strength behind every closed kitchen door. It is about the millions of women who held families, and indeed nations, together, armed not with weapons, but with resilience, grace, and secrets that shaped the course of history.
What were the secrets that allowed wartime housewives to maintain grace even when the world around them seemed to be falling apart? These weren't secrets whispered behind closed doors. They were daily practices, born of necessity, that turned ordinary homes into strongholds of resilience. Every meal, every stitch, and every household ritual became an act of quiet heroism. Let's start in the kitchen, where scarcity ruled the day. With food rationing tightening its grip, housewives had to rely on ingenuity to stretch every ounce of food. They learned to substitute, to reuse, and to waste nothing. Carrot tops and beet greens weren't thrown away. They were turned into nutritious sides. Stale bread, instead of being discarded, was reborn as puddings or savory stuffing. Meat was carefully stretched with fillers like oats, potatoes, or garden vegetables, making one small cut feed a whole family. These weren't just recipes, they were survival strategies that combined economy with creativity. In America, by 1944, nearly 3 out of every 4 housewives were preserving their own harvests. Victory gardens weren't just backyards with a few rows of beans, they were vital lifelines. Families proudly canned the produce they grew, filling jars with tomatoes, beans, peaches, and pickles that would see them through harsh winters. The average housewife managed more than 160 jars each year, a staggering number that turned kitchens into miniature food factories.
Mason jars themselves became icons of resourcefulness, sitting in neat rows like trophies of a household's determination. Meal planning was another secret skill. A single Sunday roast might feed a family for days. The first night, it appeared proudly on the table. By Monday, bones simmered into broth for soups. Later in the week, scraps re-emerged in casseroles, meat pies, or sandwiches for children's lunchboxes. In this way, one chicken could stretch across nearly a week of meals, each reinvention as thoughtful as the last. Grace was found not in abundance, but in making very little feel like plenty. Across the Atlantic, in Britain, rationing bit even deeper. Housewives often had to queue for hours to claim their limited portions, just a few ounces of butter, a scant ration of bacon, a sprinkle of sugar. Yet they faced this with resolve. Detergents were rare, so washing was done with basic household soap, scrubbed by hand until knuckles reddened. Clever cleaning tricks became household lore. Newspaper rubbed on windows for a streak-free shine, vinegar for polishing, or even sand for scouring stubborn pans. These hacks weren't just time savers, they were testaments to how women bent the limits of what little they had. Clothing, too, carried the mark of wartime ingenuity. With new fabric nearly impossible to find, housewives became masters of repair. Darning socks was not only expected, but admired. Dresses were patched carefully, sometimes turned inside out to disguise wear. Quilts were stitched from scraps of old garments, each square holding a story of sacrifice. One common trick was to take a father's worn-out trousers and cut them down into sturdy shorts for growing boys, ensuring nothing useful went to waste. These quiet acts kept families warm and clothed through years of shortage. Even beauty routines reflected this graceful thrift. Lipstick shades grew softer, mascaras were stretched to last, and eyebrows were often left unnatural. The idea was not glamour in excess, but healthful beauty, a radiant look that came from cleanliness, simplicity, and resilience. Housewives pinned curls with improvised clips, used beet juice for a rosy tint, or rubbed petroleum jelly to add shine where cosmetics were absent. In doing so, they sent a message to their families and communities: life might be hard, but dignity and pride remained untouched. Fuel, another rationed resource, required its own adaptations. Housewives learned to conserve by cooking multiple dishes in one oven session, letting the residual heat finish baking bread while a casserole bubbled below. Some even returned to the age-old practice of hay boxes, insulated containers where pots of stew continued cooking slowly without consuming precious gas or coal. Every ember, every drop of fuel mattered, and no one knew this better than the women tending their stoves with watchful eyes. And then there was the secret ingredient of community. Recipes weren't guarded like treasures, they were shared. Neighbors swapped jars of preserved fruit, exchanged gardening tips, and passed along handwritten notes filled with clever substitutions. A woman might lend a spool of thread, knowing her neighbor would return with a basket of beans. These exchanges built webs of trust that carried entire neighborhoods through the darkest years. It wasn't just about survival, it was about solidarity. At its heart, the wartime housewife's life was a blend of hardship and hidden grace. Each day demanded sacrifice, but it also revealed strength, ingenuity, and an elegance that went beyond appearances. The secrets weren't extraordinary tricks, they were ordinary actions, repeated with love and persistence, that transformed scarcity into resilience. By patching, preserving, polishing, and planning, these women held families together and infused even the bleakest days with dignity. These were the graceful secrets of wartime, written not in manuals or guides, but in the lived experience of millions of women who carried homes, families, and entire nations on their shoulders.